Welcome to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm joined here by Paul, and we're doing the extra time from the Merseyside derby. Paul, we're going to start off with running through the match, and then there's plenty more to talk about on the fallout from this game. Even more in the last, 10 minutes, an hour. Give me your thoughts on the game overall first. Let's get the game out of the way.
The game, it was just a case of a world-class team with a world-class manager coming up against a team that mediocre at best, that had a lot of its key players injured, and I would say as a fairly mediocre manager, or a manager who has a very mediocre approach to this game. So it was what it was. Liverpool put 3 or 4 goals past nearly every team they play against, and Everton we're no exception to the rule. So I thought the first 30 minutes, especially the first 15 or so, were just absolutely appalling, is the word. They could have been 2 goals up inside 2 minutes. They could have been 4 or 5 goals up after 10 minutes. If I was Jurgen Klopp, I would have been absolutely fuming that the game wasn't over. Really, really early on. They missed some chances that they shouldn't have missed, and they were sloppy at times, but they made Everton look like a gang of under-16s at times. They really, really did. I mean, we did get better after the half-hour mark. It seemed like the team seemed to calm down a little bit and play a bit of its own football and not be standing off Liverpool's players too much. But again, we just couldn't keep up with their intensity. They were the best team in the world for the high press, aren't they? And it shows. And take away the fact that it's our local rival, Liverpool, and that it was a Merseyside derby. It was Everton coming up against a team that is just so well drilled, so well organised, as a manager who they all give everything for. A manager who knows exactly what he wants from certain players on the pitch. That's why he plays them. So yeah, we were good in spots at times. Maybe good is being a bit generous. We looked okay in spots. I think it was good that we managed to get a goal before half time, and because 2-1 at half time was absolutely not a just scoreline. They should have been well out of sight. But yeah, it was just it's the hope that kills you. When we got pulled that goal back and we were playing quite well and keeping up with them, you'd thinking, right, maybe we can get the equaliser here. Maybe this game isn't over after all. Maybe we can somehow manage to come out of this without having hammered. We can all go home and have a good night, actually. It wasn't to be, though. The minute that they stepped up the gas again, we were just put to the swords easily. That's all it is to say, really.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've the first half an hour, first 15, 20 minutes, like you said, I thought we were really, could have been 2-0, and I thought we were going to be in for a really...
This is going to be ugly. Ugly was my thought, yeah.
Yeah, like a really shocking night. I think you're right. I think we got a little bit better. Obviously, we got a goal through Demarai Gray, but I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a team that are well-oiled. And like you said, they did it with Arsenal. They don't just go out to score 1-2, then pass the ball like the likes of City do. They just go out to almost like the mentality of it's training. So we'll just see how many we can get in. So,
yeah,
I completely agree with that. Obviously, one of the talking points was the amount of yellow cards picked up. Both Townsend and Demarai Gray got them for simulation. Just talk me through. Obviously, we were always going to pick up cards because it's a Merseyside derby, but they're 2 very silly cards to pick up. I thought that could easily have cost us the game further down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I've not seen the replays back because I've not watched any of the game back since the night when I was there. I don't know whether the referee was absolutely spot on in booking Townsend and Gray, or whether it was a shock of a decision. We should have had fouls. I honestly don't know. I've not watched any of the replays back, and I don't plan on ever watching the replays ever. It's just, as you said, yellow cards are to be expected in Merseyside derbies. Referees favouring Liverpool in all the tight decisions are expected in Merseyside derbies. But let's have it right here. The referee did not have any part, really, in Liverpool absolutely thumping us. Liverpool thumped us because they're far, far, far better than us, and they know exactly what they are as a club and where they're going as a club and what they want as a club and who does what at that club. And we're the complete opposite of that. We're just a mess on and off the pitch. A complete and utter mess, and you don't have to be anywhere near as good as Liverpool to beat us. It's just when you are as good as Liverpool, not only will you beat us, you'll beat us, and you'll beat us very, very widely.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I saw the Townsend one, the grey one. I missed as I was moving about when I was watching it, but the Townsend one, the ref had unfortunately got that quite right. It was I don't know what he was thinking, but he did go to ground a little bit too easily and under like pretty much no contact, which was quite shocking to see from a player who you bag as your experienced players. You expect a lot
Yeah,
better.
I mean, I don't really remember. I didn't much at Palace, but Townsend's never really struck me as a player who would go down and kind of feign an injury type thing or be diving. I mean, maybe he did have a reputation for at Palace. If he did, it seemed to escape me because we hadn't seen any of that prior to Wednesday at Everton, had we?
Yeah, no, I didn't have him down as I don't know if that's because Palace obviously play with Zaha, who tends to get more of that type of stick.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't have him down as that as well. And I mean the slimmest of bright lights off this was people on Twitter mentioning that it wasn't Rondon's worst game. Don't get me wrong, I'm not by any mile saying he had a good game. It's just slightly better than the bar he'd previously raised for us.
I'm not interested in praising Zaha using the old Tony Hibbert arguments where he has a game where he's not absolutely breathtakingly bad, and then everyone suddenly uses that as justification as to why he's in the team and why he's at the club, and everyone should leave off him. Yeah, okay, he had a game where he wasn't absolutely I saw on the pitch for us. But it doesn't change the fact that he's still absolutely terrible as a footballer and shouldn't be anywhere near the club. So I'm not in the business of praising Solomon Rondon, really. He wasn't the biggest culprit. He wasn't the player who let us down the most on Wednesday night, far, far from it. But it still doesn't change the fact that he's a rubbish footballer.
I'm gonna later on ask you for your I mean, if you can, your best players and your worst, and I feel like the player you mentioned will be the one you mentioned as one of your worst ones. Before we get on to that, though, the lineup, obviously, when it was announced, a couple of people were yeah, I'm going to say upset or a bit shocked to see Gordon be dropped. Do you think that was something? I mean, hindsight 2020, but do you think that's something at the time? Did you think that was the right move, or do you think he should have
No,
gone?
to be honest, I understood that because Gordon's still very lightweight and is still a pup, really, isn't he? He's not started many Premier League games at all in his professional football career at senior level. He's, how old is he? Is he still 19, 20?
He's like 20, I think.
Yeah, I think when he broke into the team earlier this year properly, he was 19. I don't know if he's turned 20 yet, but he's still a baby, and you can't be having a player who's very, very lightweight, which is what Gordon is at the moment because he just hasn't finished growing yet, filling out. You can't have a player like that on the pitch against Liverpool who are just so physically strong and are going to be running at you for all 90 minutes of the game. Plus, they're one of the strongest, fittest teams in the world, if not the strongest, fittest team in the world. You can't be having players who are going to be basically bullied on the pitch against Liverpool. Even if you're Man City, they can't be having lightweight players on the pitch because it's going to cost them. And I had no problem with Gordon being dropped. I understand what people say it's harsh on him because he's been playing well, but just when you're in Gordon's, when you're at the stage that you're at, in Gordon's case, when you're still 19, 20 and you're still not fully there yet as a player and you've got a lot of growing to do, both mentally and physically, you shouldn't be starting against the likes of Liverpool unless absolute needs must.
No problem. Obviously, I mentioned we'll get on to your better players. We might as well get it out of the way now because I think it's going to be a tough question for you. Name your best player and your worst player from this Everton side for the derby.
Not saying much, is it? I mean, Jordan Pickford made a few good saves earlier on, didn't he? I mean, people will say he should have done better with the Jordan Henderson chance, but he did very well. I can't remember who it was. Someone had a header that he kept out very early. I went down to Gladys Street end. He was marshalling the defence. Michael Keane, for once, wasn't absolutely disastrous, but the same applies as it does with Rondon. Just because he had a game where he wasn't breathtakingly bad doesn't suddenly mean that he's a good player and everyone should stop criticising him. It's the best player. I mean, there's some players who weren't noticeably bad, but I'm going to really struggle to hold someone up and say, yeah, you did well, because I don't think any of them really did well overall. Worst player on the pitch might seem harsh, but and because it's not entirely his fault. He's got a lot of things going against him, and he shouldn't be in the position where he's getting played in these games anymore. But it was probably Seamus Coleman, just for that mistake alone. But I'm not going to dwell on that because, as we've said, it's not Seamus Coleman's fault as the only senior right back at the club who can play in these types of games. He shouldn't be anywhere near playing in a Merseyside derby at his age and at this stage in his career. But that's just the fact that what happened. Third goal probably just means that he's the player you have to look at and say he's the one who's made the biggest error in the game that's led to the scoreline being what it was, more than anyone else.
Yeah, I had a feeling Coleman was probably going to be for that mistake alone, and I completely agree. I think he's I think if anything that game and a couple of others, this isn't the first time, but that should have been the biggest eye opener that ideally he's probably passed. Yeah,
that was his. For me, that was his Phil Neville against Wigan moment. That's just a game where if a footballer has his career ended by one game, it was Phil Neville against Wigan. That could be the game that ends Seamus Coleman's career. I mean, not immediately because who else are we going to play there? But that'll be the game where just everyone gives up on him now and accepts that he's got to be replaced and we can't get any more mileage out of him. So they'll be looking to replace him as soon as possible. They should have been looking to replace him as soon as possible for the last 2 or 3 years. I've been saying this on the channel for a while. But I think even the most ardent Coleman defenders or the most lackadaisical person in the recruitment who didn't think it was a big deal, even they'll have switched on to the fact now that Coleman just simply can't be playing in the first team anymore.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that is the one where even the higher ups have got to look at that and think, right, big issues. But like you said, should have been a problem that should have been noticeable way before.
Should have been sorted out a long time ago, and Coleman shouldn't find himself in the position he's in. But he's sadly not the first one. It happened to Tim Howard. It happened to Tim Cahill. It happened to arguably Phil Jagielka, just players who were kept on well past the sell-by date, were overplayed, and sadly had a bit of an anticlimactic ending to what should have been they've had a very, very positive Everton career, even if they don't achieve the things we wanted them to achieve, like winning trophies and playing in Europe consistently. But just a player who's really, really done well for the club overall. But sadly, because of the people above him overplaying him and not replacing him soon enough, he's basically going to end his career with a bit of a whimper and with a bit of a bad taste in supporters' mouths, and it's a shame.
Yeah, one of the things we do have here that I know Rafa mentioned in his press conference afterwards was injuries. Obviously, for Moshiri, and we'll get on to Benitez and the rest of them in a bit. But the injuries are mentioned quite a bit. But looking at it, I mean, Yerry Mina and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, they're the only real ones. Do you think they'd have made a massive difference?
No, we wouldn't have won the game with them playing, but Liverpool wouldn't have put us to the sword as badly as they did with those two playing. But that's all I'm willing to say. I'm not interested in hearing Benitez's rubbish. I'm really not. That's just him saving his arse, which is what he does whenever he's under pressure at a club. He just starts pulling out all these crazy talk about. He said more stuff today, which we'll probably go on to, won't we? Just more cringe-worthy nonsense. It's the same as when he was at Liverpool himself and he was coming out with his facts speech, and when he was at Inter Milan and he was doing that car crash press conference where he basically said that certain players at the club needed to be thrown out, the same players who'd won the treble a few months before. And when he was at Real Madrid and he was telling the players to basically work harder and telling them about how they're all not as good as Barcelona and they don't work hard as Barcelona. It's like, come on, mate, read the room. You don't say that to Galacticos like Cristiano Ronaldo and Pepe and Casillas, all the players who were still at Real Madrid at the time. It's just Benitez's MO, isn't it? When things are going terrible, whether you think he's right to blame or not, he won't not take any responsibility for himself. It's everyone else's fault, and it's nothing he can do. And now, if he could only have his way, it would all be a lot better. It's just Benitez's MO. Blame everyone else except yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we will very quickly go on to him in a minute because I don't think there's much more that we can press ourselves through of the actual game itself. The one thing I will ask is, obviously, I think it's the biggest defeat, isn't it, at home in the derby? Did you expect 4-1 or did you expect worse?
Yeah.
Did you expect better?
No. I expected to just get put to the sword. That's what happened. Liverpool beat a lot of teams by put 3 or 4 goals past an awful lot of teams, and they win games by 2 or 3 goal margins near enough every week. So yeah, it is exactly what I expected, and it's just, as I said, it's the hope that kills you. You delude yourself into thinking that this will be the time where it's going to be different. And when you're in the ground on the night and you pull that goal back, you convince yourself that, okay, the fans are up for this, the players seem to be responding, maybe we can pull this off after all, maybe we've ridden out the storm. But when you look at it, the cold light of day, with hindsight being everything, it was just a case of Liverpool taking their foot off the gas for about 15 minutes either side of our time, and as soon as Klopp got them in, I imagine at half time, we probably tore a strip off them and told them, why are you letting this mediocre team, mediocre at best team, basically give you a bit of a hard night's work when you were dominating them so easily to start off with. So no, I'm not the least bit surprised they hammered us. Not at all. I'm more surprised that Liverpool didn't put us away earlier, because they certainly had the opportunities to.
Yeah, like we said, the first 15, 20 minutes, it could have easily been a 6-1 game, this. And I agree, they stepped off the gas for us to score. It could have easily been a 6-0 type of game, this could have. We will get on to the manager, because there's plenty, him and the powers that be that we'll move on to after him. There's plenty to talk about. And even though the derby was only a couple of days ago, it seems like loads has been said. I mean, we'll go through. What did you make of his post-match comments after the derby? We'll try and go through in the chronological order.
Sorry, being honest with you, mate. I've heard his post-match comments. I don't care his post-match comments. I'm not interested. Not even worth talking about. It's just, as I've already said, it's just more nonsense from a fella who is willing to blame anything and anyone except himself. And I do accept that an awful lot of the problems, the majority of the problems that are going on, are beyond his control, and we're here before he got here, and there's not only so much he can do about them as things stand. But he's not faultless and everything. But as Benitez will always put out there with his media mates and the way and his personality, he never takes responsibility for anything, even when it's right that he take responsibility for it. No one forced him to play 4-4-2. No one forced him to bring in Solomon Rondon. No one forced him to take off Andros Townsend. No, Benitez's car crash comments after the game, his press conference, when it was basically everyone blames someone else except me. I don't care. Not interested.
Well, obviously, since then, there's been there's been quite a lot of rumours. There's been quite a lot of news. Rudy Galletti, we posted, was on about that he might not see the Arsenal game. And now, obviously, there's rumours that there's a big meeting tonight at Everton. Do you think he will see into the Arsenal game, or do you think?
Yeah, I do. I do think he's going to see the Arsenal game purely for the fact that we've heard it from Moshiri, who makes the decision. Moshiri has said that he's not sacking him, at least not for the time being. So yeah, he will see the Arsenal game. Whoever's having this board meeting tonight, whoever it is, they could scream at the wall for all they care. Moshiri texted Jim White. Moshiri said Moshiri's not in the country. And Moshiri would be in the country if any sudden changes like that were going to be made. Don't know when Moshiri's coming back. He's in the States, isn't he? But we've heard Moshiri say he's not sacking him. And even if he changed his mind, I think he'd wait until he was back in the country before he did it. So yeah, absolutely, he'll make the Arsenal game. Now, what happens after that, I don't know. But 100% he's not going anywhere before the Arsenal game. 100%.
Yeah, I've got it in my head. I think Palace will be his, straw that might break him. Just because, from what Fahad's comments were the other day, it sounds like he's backing him. And to be fair, from what we understand, from what the media have dropped out, he was pretty much Fahad's sort of appointment. And I don't think Moshiri wants to admit that it's been a disaster quite this early on into Benitez's reign. But I've gone.
I was just going to say, for all the valid criticism that we've been given, Benitez has been getting, and for all the stuff I've just said about him, it's still the same point. It's still the right when people point out, if we sack him, what's it going to achieve other than just making people a bit less angry for a couple of days? It doesn't fix any problems if Benitez goes. It doesn't fix anything upstairs with the board. It doesn't fix the recruitment. It doesn't make the players who we've got suddenly going to start playing better, really, because I don't think any manager's going to come in and give us a bit of a new player bounce. These players don't have the personality for it. They haven't performed under any manager they've worked under. And in some cases, they've played under 5 or 6. In Seamus Coleman's place, he's worked under about 7. So I just don't think sacking Benitez will achieve anything anyway. So what's the point of even thinking about sacking him, other than just the fact that you can't stand the fact the next Liverpool manager is managing us? Well, the reality is he is. And sacking him now wouldn't suddenly make the performance any better. It wouldn't help players come back from injuries any sooner.
No, I mean the list of odds on favourite. I know you should always take them with a pinch of salt, but like it's not that it's not a star-studded list either.
No, I'm not. There's no one on that list who I'd look at who I'm even remotely interested in. That's why I think Benitez is safe as it is, because Moshiri will have looked around at who's available as well, most probably, and seen that there's no one there who's going to bring, who you can look. There's no one there who you look at and you think, yeah, he'd definitely come in and he'd do this better than Benitez. There isn't anyone. It's all just ex-players who are looking for a gig somewhere, like Frank Lampard, or I saw Ruud van Nistelrooy's name mentioned, or just people like that. No, we don't need to be giving them a bone because they've not done anything in their careers at all suggest that they can even manage anywhere close to this level. Maybe that's a bit harsh on Lampard because he has managed the Premier League team in Chelsea. But Frank Lampard, nothing on his CV, is there? And there's no point, if you're going to hire a manager who's got nothing on his CV of note, really, you might as well just hire someone in-house, mightn't you?
I was just about to say the thing with Lampard is, like you said, there's not much on his CV, and I don't think he'll. Not that connecting with fans is always essential, but I just don't think he's the right fit. I don't know how to explain it other than he just doesn't click.
Who is the right fit though? We've had loads of different types of managers who all have their own ways of doing things and all have different personalities, and none of them are fitted, have they? The only one, even Ancelotti, when we were all liking him, when he was popular with the fan base, you could still say he didn't fit because people still looked at it from the outside thinking, what is Carlo Ancelotti doing at that basket case of a club who were not really going to go anywhere anytime soon? So even the managers who were popular whilst they were here, or at least popular for a little bit, they don't fit. Koeman didn't fit really because no one knew what his idea was, and he wasn't really particularly bothered about building a relationship with the fans. Allardyce didn't fit because he's Sam Allardyce and he's unbearable. Silva didn't really fit, even though I think he tried hard to try and fit, but it was just nothing was ever really building under him. You just don't think he had the personality that was strong enough to handle the pressure or the fans or the players' egos type thing. Yeah, when I say the fans, he didn't have the personality to fit the fans. He didn't give off the right body language at times. He wasn't able to communicate well enough and get his message across. And that was probably the same case for the players themselves. So he didn't fit, even though I do think his intentions were good and he gave it his best go, but he didn't fit. Ancelotti didn't fit because even though he was really good and he did well for us and we all loved him till he left, he was a manager who hadn't built anything in a long time and hadn't stayed around at a club for a long time, which is what we were all hoping that he would do and what we have needed him to do. So he didn't fit because it just didn't fit. It just didn't match up to the type of jobs he's been taking for the last decade or so. And now we've got Benitez, who, again, I think is giving it his best. His intentions are good, but he doesn't fit purely because fans don't like his past affiliations. And again, fans don't like his personality, akin to Allardyce, where we don't like the fact that he's never willing to take any responsibility, and the fact that sometimes the message he's trying to give across doesn't come across. He comes across not in a way that Evertonians appreciate.
Yeah, no. I don't know who, other than like you said, the players who are looking for a job and probably would only look at it because they've been unemployed for a little bit, like Lampard, who would see it as getting back on the horse. I have this feeling that some people will look at the job and think rather not touch it just because of the way we're being ran at the minute, how it looks from the outside in. I don't think we're as appeasing a job as we were.
No. Any manager who's got even stock that's even halfway good would not come near our job. The only manager who take our jobs at the moment are ones who are just desperate for a payday, or managers who are on the bones of their arse and will just take anything, like your Steve Bruce's, your Mark Hughes' of the world. I was going to say your Eddie Howe's, but he's got a gig in Newcastle now. Who wants the likes of them at our club? I didn't want them at our club when we had no money 7-8 years ago when Moyes left.
Yeah, no, that is one silver lining. Eddie Howe would predominantly be the favourite if he hadn't already got his Newcastle job. He'd have taken over the Danish manager as the favourite easily. I'd put money. I don't even know that Danish fella is. Maybe that's my ignorance, but I don't know who he is, what he's done in his career, why he'd make a good manager, why he would make a good manager. That just shows you that I don't think that the chances of Benitez being sacked like imminently, as in the next week or the next 2 weeks or whatever, I don't think there's any chance of it, because all these managers getting linked with the jobs are people who
no one's heard of, and there's a very good chance Moshiri doesn't know much about them either, and he's not going to sack Benitez for some person who is not really on his radar, is he? So.
No, I agree, mate. Other than the Denmark team in the Euros, I don't really know him, and like you can't. I don't want to judge his managerial ability off a weird Euros for them at best. Anyway, I don't know enough about him, which makes me you'd want a little bit higher than some no mark in the nicest way. Ideally, anyway, in an ideal world, I know, and obviously that's the people of the world might not want to come to us, but like I just moving on to other stuff that that's come out. You mentioned obviously some of the stuff that's going to get Benitez in terms of his comments that are making no sense, the ramblings. I thought it was quite interesting that the Athletic were reporting as well that a couple of the key players starting to turn, don't like his style of play. They think it's one key player who they didn't mention, but people seem to think it might be Luca Dean. They said that it's sort of stopped him from performing to the level he was. Also, they reckon that they can't understand the long ball reliance and the constant picking of Solomon Rondon. When the players start turning against you, do you think you can turn this round if the players are starting to sort of turn their heads?
To the players, piss off. Piss off. You've got no right to be demanding anything of any managers. You've got no right to be griping. A lot of yous are all millionaires, and you don't give a toss about the club. He tells you all to just jog on the spot for half an hour continuously. Do it. Because no, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not saying, oh well, even the players don't like him. That's a reason. No, if the players don't like him, good, because that shows that he's actually demanding something off the players, and it's about time someone demanded something off the players, because they've had it easy for far too long, and they've been putting in gutless showings for far too long. So no, I don't. The fact that the players reportedly don't like him, I don't care one bit. If the players are going against you, that shows you're doing something right, because you're probably pushing the players more than they want to be pushed. So no, I'm not bothered about the players reportedly turning on him if that's true.
Yeah, I did think it's a bit ironic. It's a bit ironic that obviously we're talking, and you said before on the worst case, it's Seamus Coleman's been through 7. It sort of comes to a point now where I don't know if the players are fully in the position to the more they do that, the more I think people are going to start asking questions of is it the manager?
The more they do that, the more supporters should actually turn around and back them. Because why would you back the players? Based on what I've just said, the fact that they've had so many managers and they've all been gutless for all of them, and I've seen so many managers get sacked because they've not performed. So the fact that the players are turning on is actually a feather in his cap, I think, the way the players are carrying on, the way they've been carrying on for so many years now. So if you're a player and you turn around and you're saying, I don't like the job he's asking me to do, okay, when you were playing for a manager who was giving you a job that you like doing, were you any better? No. So yeah, piss off, 20 football. You don't like it, get out. We'll hold the door open for you.
Well, obviously, we're going to move on to the ball, because obviously the other big thing from the game, other than tensions and angers flaring, was the quite obvious, quite clear chance of sack the board. You had Marcel Brands and the fan having, I'm not going to say an altercation, but like a couple of words.
A confrontation.
Yeah. There were about 3 words from Marcel Brands, which is
a record for him. Yeah.
I was gonna say something similar. So we'll move on to the board and obviously there's a picture going around of Kenwright and Denise smirking after the 4th went in, which obviously you wouldn't have seen it live because you were at the game. I was watching it, and when it went to them, I did think it looked like a smirk, but and you just can't tell if he's wiping his mouth, but on the stills it's pretty obvious. Where do you begin with the board? Do you think
we'll go? I think we should go through them one at a time, because the boards, every person on that board has got their own agenda and their own different reasons for valid reasons for fans being angry at them. So,
who do you want to start with first?
Well, I'll tell you what I think of Marcel Brands. If we just want to start with him, Marcel Brands, for me, he's either one or two things. He's either completely incompetent, or he's happy to just sit there and be a yes man and take money. And no matter which one of those two it is, we don't need either one of those at Goodison Park at Everton Football Club. So pick your coat up and show yourself the door, mate. There's been hints, wasn't it? Apparently he said to that fan who confronted him and said, do you recruit all of this, blah, blah, blah. Apparently he said something like, is it the players? Which many people thought might have been a Freudian slip. Maybe Marcel Brands kind of letting out his own frustrations and thinking that it wasn't just the players on the pitch that were letting us down. It was other people on the board who he has to work with who he thinks are letting us down. Well, if that's the case, mate, the door's over there. You didn't have to sign a new deal in the summer. If these people, we've been saying this for months about him, and some fans still defend him. But I think the vast majority of fans are in agreement now that this fella, at best, is just happy to be completely overruled on everything. And at worst, he's actually right in with the decision making, and he goes a lot, and he's part of it. That all these bad recruitment decisions and these bad decisions throughout the club that impact things long term, like what gets done with the academy and who's given coaching jobs on the first team staff and things like that. So Marcel Brands, as far as I'm concerned, you come into the club and you've done nothing that validates you being here. You've been here long enough now to make a significant impact on the club and put your stamp on things, and you absolutely haven't done that. And if it's been because the people on the other board, other people on the board won't let you, then you've basically just been accepting of that by the fact that you've been taking your wage and not resigning. Because a director of football, it does me head in when people try and use this reasoning that maybe you don't know what the director of football definition is at Everton. Maybe he's doing what they've got to tell him to do. Maybe as far as they're concerned, he's fulfilling his remit. A director of football is a person who literally, don't mean to be like silly when I say this, he literally directs. He tells the manager what football we're going to play, what players we're going to sign in order to fit that model. In a lot of cases, who the manager's even going to be, and who the possible next manager after the person who's in there now currently. He'll also decide who the manager's going to be after the current incumbent is gone. That's what good directors of football do. They've always got a long-term plan. This is what we'll do if we suddenly lose this manager or we suddenly lose this player. And they're the person who goes to the owner and convinces them to spend the money on a player that they've identified. Does Marcel Brands do any of that? There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that he's done any of that in the time he's been here. None. Absolutely none. So as far as I'm concerned, Marcel Brands has either come here and been absolutely useless, or Marcel Brands has come here and he's been absolutely terrible because he's come along and he's been part of all the rubbish decision making. Either one it is, just pick your coat up and go, mate. You've come in and you've not done what everyone was led to believe you were going to do for this club when you arrived. And I haven't been allowed to do this. I've never been given a free hand at the club. That's no excuse. That's not good enough. If that's the case, mate, then have some convictions and say, I'm not going to work in the club. That is basically not going to let me do my job properly. You didn't have to sign that new deal in the summer, mate. If it is a case of you basically get overruled on everything and you're trying to fight the good fight and you're trying to convince people to make the right decisions, but you're getting ignored, then you should have gone a long time ago. You shouldn't have signed a new deal, because by signing a new deal, you're basically endorsing what's been going on already. So pick your coat up and go. What's your feelings about Brands, mate?
I mean, I don't know. If a year ago, I'd have defended him a little bit more. And I get the feeling of he's not being let, he's not being let to do what he's meant to do. And partially, I'm like, okay. But then, I mean, some of the stuff though, like you said, he signed a new contract. He's been appointed on the board now. Which in that case, if that's where he thinks he belongs more on the board, then again, there needs to be a conversation where he says, I don't want to be the director of football. If you look at it, people are like Steve Walsh's job. He didn't do a very good job through most Everton fans.
No, but he actually did the job.
Yeah,
he actually did pick what players he was signing.
I was going to say just execute it poorly, but like when you look at Brands, I've ran out of ways to sort of patience with him in defence, because like don't get me wrong, I think they're all as guilty as each other for the mediocrity that's going through the club. But his job is like you were saying about the long-term plan. What do we do if we lose this? I think Ancelotti was a prime example. There was no plan involved. Don't get me wrong, it was a shock, and it was a shock to all of us. This is a Premier League football club. This isn't, an independent shop or a local,
More family
team.
business, yeah.
Yeah, where if if your main boss leaves, you're like, oh, what do we do? You should have a plan. You should always be. And Ancelotti, I think for all of us was a coup anyway. I don't think we
Yeah.
ever. And he always said, he'd ideally like to see himself in the new stadium. We should have been already thinking, well, if that's the case, who's going to, carry on from him? Because he always made it clear he'd carry the team, on, but not stay there forever. And I don't think any of us expected him to retire at Everton. So I don't know how, straight away it wasn't, well, who's going to come in? And the main one for me is directors of football are meant to implement your style, which obviously gets chucked around an awful lot recently. What's Everton's style? That again falls down to him. He should be the one, saying what our style is, how we should implement it. And we've not had the managers, I don't think, to sort of indicate our style, and we don't sign players that indicate a style. Even if you could argue maybe Benitez is slightly more like Ancelotti than, I don't know, just putting it out there because he was linked in the summer than Roberto Martinez was. Maybe you could make that case, but then we've signed certain players that wouldn't suit that style anyway. Likes of Alex Iwobi was never going to play more structured football or be good at structured football. And then that obviously comes down to solely him. And I think saying he's not allowed to do something, I don't think that's a good enough defence. Now, if I came, even if you went to Moshiri and he only accepted one of your 10 ideas, I feel like maybe that's what he does and he only accepts one. To go with 100 then and he'll accept 10 of them, hopefully. Really press your case. There's enough evidence now that you could go to Fard Moshiri and go, it's not working, sort of listen to me. But yeah, the lack of progression in this squad, I think they're all equally to blame, and it doesn't shine bright for any of them.
Yeah. Going on to Moshiri, we'll talk about him briefly. Moshiri is he's thicker than a cushion, isn't he? He clearly has no knowledge at all about football. He doesn't know. He's basically just a fella out the pub, isn't he? In the sense that he thinks he knows a good player when he sees one, and he probably watches a good football match when it's on the telly, and he likes to go to as many games as he can. But he couldn't sit down and tell you how to build a football team, or if you could sign this player, how he'd fit into that team and how exactly he'd make it better, or what that player is worth, or what he could be worth in a couple of years' time. He doesn't know anything about that side of the game, but he clearly thinks he does because he's involving himself far too much, and he's listening to people who've got vested interests and trying to push their players and their ideas onto him when it doesn't really benefit Everton. It just benefits them personally. Like that agent who I can never say his name, Kia, somebody.
Yeah, I can never pronounce his surname either, mate. I tried it a couple of times on the channel.
James can say it perfectly, and so can my brother Terry, but I think everyone knows who he means. His name's Kia, and he's that famous agent. He was Tevez's agent. He's been in football for 20 plus years, and he's probably one of the most famous agents in the game, other than the other fella, Riola
and Mendes, in it. They're the other two that are like.
Yeah, and this guy, that they make up the big three of the football agents. But Moshiri, my argument will always be about Moshiri, when it matter what he gets wrong and how annoyed I get at him and how much he doesn't listen to the fans and he listens to the wrong people and he gives responsibility to people who shouldn't be given any responsibility. I would always rather have an owner who has a lot of money and doesn't know how to spend it than have an owner who's got absolutely zero resources and it just keeps us scraping by, which is what we were before he arrived. So I really hope that Farhad Moshiri hasn't lost interest in Everton and isn't anywhere close to throwing in the towel on Everton and stopping investing money. I really hope not. I hope, if anything, Moshiri's more motivated than ever to make this happen. I just pray to God he starts learning some lessons and he starts actually stop sticking his oar into things where he shouldn't be involved. I just really want him to become one of these owners who is a lot more hands-off, and we only see him once or twice a season for a big cup game or something, or at the AGM. I want him to be an owner who just goes back to Monaco, wherever he lives, and we never ever hear from him. And I know some people don't like those type of owners. They call them disengaged owners, but that's just what an owner that Everton need at the moment. I don't mind having a disengaged owner, just as long as the owner's willing to back the club. And I'm happy for someone else, aka just sort of e.g. a competent director of football who knows exactly what he's doing and is left to get on with it. I'm more than happy for him to be the face of the hierarchy and for the owner to just sit off in his mansion somewhere. So that's what I really happens with Moshiri. I don't want him to leave Everton anytime soon, and I really hope that he's not having any thoughts about doing that because who could blame him if he did? Because how much money has he wasted on us to get absolutely nowhere? Moving on from Moshiri, going on to Denise. I don't have a big problem with Denise Barham-Baxendale. I think she's a really lovely person, and there's a place for her at Everton Football Club. It's just not as the Everton CEO. She's got a job that she is really not qualified to have. Okay? Now, that's not to do her down, because there's probably less than 100 people in the entire world. There's 6 or 7 billion people on this planet. There's probably less than 100 who are qualified to be a CEO of a Premier League football club, a competent CEO. It's such a hard, specific, stressful job. So fair play to her for giving her her best and coming out and having a go. And I'd really like if the club could find somewhere for it to be, whether it's going back at the towards the charity side of it, or whether it's just doing something else, like an ambassador or something like that. I don't really think she deserves anywhere near the level of stick that any of the other board members get. She's been on the board not many years. She's not the person who's overseen all these failures that have held Everton back for decades now and have frustrated fans. And if fans come across her, I really hope that you don't turn your eye on it, because she doesn't deserve that. She's just there giving her best, but her best, unfortunately, is not in the role that she's in. That's not how to get the best out of her. So please don't abuse Denise Barham-Baxendale. She's a really good person, and the club should be keeping her around, I think, at least. Now, we're going on to Bill Kenwright. It's the same old stuff with this fella. People know what my feelings are about him. I'm absolutely not a fan of him. But to be honest, the fact that he's still here now in 2021, and he's clearly still got his fingers and everything, because if he's apparently calling emergency board meetings and things like that, and the fact that there's still people who are coming to the club or are getting jobs at the club specifically because of him, e.g. Jose Baxter, e.g. David Unsworth still being the head of the academy when the academy's not produced anyone of note in 7 or 8 years. It's probably only reduced one person of note in the last 15 years, and that was Ross Barkley, right? Wayne Rooney coming back to the club for that year, that was specifically Bill Kenwright who forced that through. He even admitted it at the end of season awards that year. He said, I specifically brought Wayne back. Wayne being at Everton this season was on me totally, and I'll defend it to the hilt. So anyone who says that Kenwright's got no power, you're absolutely deluded. You're not listening to facts. Of course he does. He's still got a ton of power at the club. Whether he can make things. I'm not suggesting that he makes decisions and that he can override people like Moshiri. Clearly, Moshiri's going to give the final seal of approval to everything, but he's clearly got a lot of influence over Moshiri, and he's allowed to have his way at the club still far more than he should do. But I blame a lot of our own supporters for the fact that Bill Kenwright's still here in 2021, still having a very negative impact on the club in 2021, and spreading this disgusting culture that he brought with him when he first came in the 90s. Fans 10 years ago, on the 19th of November 2011, I'm not sure if you'll remember it, mate, because I was there. I was in my teens, and Terry was in his early 20s. There was a group of fans called the Blue Union. There were some idiots in it. I gather that there was some fans in there who were just total D-heads, for the lack of a better word, and it was easy to slag them off. But there was a lot of good people in that group who tried to wake the world up, particularly Evertonians, to what Bill Kenwright had done to this club since he come in there, and what the club had become since Bill Kenwright had been chairman. They produced a pamphlet full of facts of all the lies Bill Kenwright had told, all the things that had happened to the club since Bill Kenwright took over that were negative. They tried to bring it get the media on side. They tried to fight the good fight. They tried to show the world Bill Kenwright has not done good for Everton since he's been the chairman, and they were completely shouted down. They were called copites. They were called every swear word you can think of. Why don't you just support the team? You're negative to this. And then literally when the fella's face came up on the camera, the majority of the stadium stood up and clapped him. They stood up and clapped him. So all those fans now who are turning on him, the vast majority will have been people who stood up and clapped him, or at least didn't agree with what the Blue Union were trying to do 10 years ago when they tried to wake up the world to what this fella was and what he'd done to Everton Football Club. You didn't want to listen then. You were happy to just bury your heads under the sand, or in some cases you actively defended the fella and lashed out at the people who were trying to spread facts about. That's a bad way. You lashed out at the people who were stating facts about him, who were bringing these facts to light at what he'd done, and you hit out at them and you beat them down and you called them every swear word, and you called them copites, and you called them not real Evertonians. I'm going off on one here because it's something I care about. Every supporter who backed Kenwright during that time 10 years ago when fans were trying to get a campaign going against them, you deserve what's going on here. The Everton Football Club we've got now is the Everton you wanted, because you stood up and you didn't do anything when fans tried to fight the good fight. You stood up and you clapped the fella, and if you didn't clap him, you didn't listen to the supporters who were trying to spread the word of what he'd done. All the facts, they produced a pamphlet of all the lies he told about the Fortress Sports Fund, about not selling players, about how certain people wouldn't be brought back to the club and they were. All the things that he'd lied about, all the things that he stopped doing, about how he cancelled the AGMs on us and how he wouldn't engage with fans and how he had favourites at the club he was giving jobs to. It was all there. The Blue Union tried to point it out and they were completely shut down, and they had the media go after them as well. National journalists and the Liverpool Echo all didn't want to know and spread horrible things about these fans, calling them disgraces, and how Gary Speed will be turning in his grave about them, the way they were behaving, and how the Liverpool Echo, Graham Sharp, one man and his dog, and the Liverpool Echo didn't want to know. They saw their asses over that. And even though it came out that Bill Kenwright owes the Echo owe Bill Kenwright a favour, and it all came out in the wash, basically. The Liverpool Echo didn't want to know. He said, well, we don't think that Bill Kenwright's really doing they're bad for Everton Football Club. You don't think he's doing bad for Everton Football Club because these are all Liverpool supporters who like the fact that Everton have gone crap under him. So, no. As far as I'm concerned, the fact that Bill Kenwright's still at Everton in 2021, the main people responsible for that are a large section of Evertonians who didn't listen when other Evertonians tried to wake us up to what he's like, and you deserve the Everton you're getting now.
I mean, that was a lot for me to digest then, mate. I think I might have been a bit too young to remember the Blue Union, but a lot of it, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, especially with all the other three as well. Like Denise seems like a lovely lady, and I think you're right. I don't think she holds much weight in the football sides of things. So to blame her for the state of the the pit,
the team, and the way, and the manager, it's not her fault. If Denise keeps coming to games, I don't know. I know it got very, very nasty in the press box, but I hope none of that nastiness was aimed at her specifically. Hopefully she just was kind of caught in the crossfire, and that was all it was. She's a really good person here, and as you said, the major football decisions that are getting made are not on her. It's not her side of things to do. She's the CEO. She runs the business side of the club, and she shouldn't be doing that because it's not something that she's an expert in, I don't believe, or at least not good enough of an expert to be managing a Premier League football club. And that's not to slag her off. As I said, there's probably less than 100 people in the world who are qualified to do it out of a population of 7 billion, and she's just not in that select 100, most likely. I couldn't tell you one person off the top of my head who else could suggest could do it, but no, just don't turn your eye on Denise, please, because it's not Denise's fault.
No. And you hit the nail right. I literally said this to my dad the other day when we were about Everton about Fard Moshiri. I was like, all we've ever wanted is an owner with a bit of money. We don't have to sell our best players. We've got that. I said to my dad, I'd be happy if he just sat in Monaco on his yacht, drinking, doing whatever he wants, a couple of cocktails in the sun. And we saw him, like you said, maybe an AGM, maybe a cup final, semi-final if we got there. And I'd be happy with that. I know what you're saying about certain fans and certain clubs don't like their owners to do that. I've got no problem with that. Just use it for what it is, which is your business. You put the money in, you collect some of the rewards, and just leave it like that. I'd be very happy if we, hardly saw him. Apart from the obvious occasions where your owner has to be there, cup finals, the AGMs, I'd be very happy for him to do exactly what you said and just sit in Monaco. And then Ken Wright, I agree with you. I don't think that I struggle to believe that people don't think he has his opinion. I think his opinion still carries a lot of weight. And I think we're seeing examples of that still. I don't think Fard Moshiri, I'm going to go out on a limb and say he doesn't know Jose Baxter ever is a person, never mind played football or for Everton. Because he wasn't he wasn't an Everton legend. He's not going to be up in the walls at Goodison, is he? He's not going to see photos of him and go, who's that? I think that's completely not a Moshiri decision, because I don't think he knows who he is, in all honesty, till he's now paying his wages. And the idea that people will say he doesn't carry, I think he carries a lot of weight. And if the rumours are true that he's called the meeting tonight, he clearly carries still quite a bit of weight. And I have hazard to guess, when Farhad isn't here, Bill Kenwright is probably second in command to Farhad Moshiri. I imagine Farhad Moshiri says, you deal with stuff while I'm not there. So, I completely agree.
That should be the director of football, shouldn't it?
Yeah, ideally you'd say that it's Brands. The same with communication stuff. I will say that I'm not a massive fan of, fans have indicted crying out for years for better communication. And I hate the fact that it's the best communication we have is Jim White on TalkSport. It's awful. It's all, and that's not necessarily saying Farhad should go and do, the Aston Villa type thing, because that was quite shocking and groundbreaking itself, because people keep going, how unusual is this? But I think the club have, whether it's through the media, whether it's Brands, I think the club could have used a club communication links, better. They have a media team for a reason. Use your media team, not Jim White of TalkSport.
It was all too brief. That period when Martinez was at the club and Alan Myers was the head of the communications. I'm not sure what his official title was, but he was basically the person who was communicated. He was the go-between between the hierarchy of the club and the fans, and he was so great at that role. I don't know why he left. He's never really gone on the record and talked about it. It must be something quite personal, and that's fair enough. But I'd love it if Alan or someone like Alan was brought back to the club, because that was the most happy period of being an Evertonian that I've ever experienced in 2013-14 when Martinez was here. And it wasn't just because the results on the pitch were good in that first season. The atmosphere around the club was good because we had people at the club doing a lot of little things to make fans feel involved and make fans feel listened to and appreciated. And Alan Myers was one of the top examples of that. He had, I can't remember if you remember, he had what it was called a tea party, where basically it was just a get together where in one of the club lounges where a couple of hundred fans managed to win invites to it. And I think Martinez turned up on one of them and he spoke to the fans for about half an hour, and they brought in an ex-player sometimes. But it was just kind of these nice evenings where everyone just kind of had a drink and everyone just mixed and shared memories and things like that. There's not been anything like that. There's been no sort of like fan engagements, events, nothing really. I mean, every now and then they'll have some events at the Philharmonic where they wheel out the latest stadium news, don't they? Like the design and that famous video of what the stadium's going to look like inside the halls and things like that. But you can't have them like every month or so. And I get that, but what's wrong with booking like a little, I don't know, somewhere in the city centre or somewhere in one of the lounges in the stadium, and just bring in a couple of hundred fans in, or 100 fans or so in every month or so, and chances are that all the season ticket holders in the club will get to one of these events. If they want to go to one, they'll get to at least one a season where you can go and you can feel involved and you're seeing people at the club in the flesh, like maybe an ex-player and someone you normally only see on Twitter, like Alan Myers, when he's communicating with you. You actually get to meet him face to face and you can maybe ask a question or two, as long as they're sensible. We've got to be doing things like that again to make fans feel involved. Whereas Marcel Brands thinks if he just gives some interview to some no-mark Dutch newspaper, that's all he has to do. It's not good enough.
No, I agree, mate. I was going to say, I said Jim White, but obviously it's not just Farhad that's using the media. Like you said, Brands spoke to, I thought, like that was ever going to get back to us, speaking to Dutch outlets.
It wouldn't do without social media, yeah. Imagine if he was doing that 20 years ago, then we wouldn't even know it or know about it.
Exactly.
If we were doing that in any time before 2006, 2007, when social media really took off, we'd never even know that he did these interviews with Dutch newspapers.
Exactly, we'd be none the wiser.
Yeah, he's not giving an interview where he knows that fans are going to hear it. He's given an interview to probably just some mate he's got, some contact in the Dutch newspaper who he's agreed to give 5 minutes of his time. And Evertonians had to go their way to find out what he said when he's talking about our club and what he plans for the club. It's like, well, can't you say this to us directly? Or at least say it to a source who's a lot more easy to find. Couldn't you say it to an English newspaper? Couldn't you say it to a local newspaper? Couldn't you say it to a radio station? Couldn't you say it to a TV station like Sky or BT? No, just talk to one of your mates in the Dutch newspaper and about all the club's business and what you plan for the club. It's like, well, why are you telling some other person in Holland who isn't bothered one way or the other? Because Everton are not a big presence in Holland. Everton aren't in the Dutch league. So what a strange person to be giving this information to, or a strange outlet rather.
It was really bizarre. On that note, though, we are going to leave it for the extra time bit because we'll jump onto the match preview. Thank you for everybody for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, comment your thoughts down below on the derby. Any of the stuff we discussed aboard. Benitez, do you think he'll stay? Do you think he'll go? Don't forget as well, you can buy your Everton stuff through the Everton direct link in the description down below. I think there's also a link on there for a Toffee Blues jumper. And we have now got a partnership with Score Draw Retro, where you can get your Everton kits, old ones, new, old retro kits. So go check them out as well and stay safe.